Available in paperback at e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Do black people want fantasy and science fiction from a black lens or a white lens? And the reason why I ask that question is because the perspective we see ourselves colors our perception of self and our perception of the world. Now, when it comes down to most black people, we got most of our fantasy and science fiction and our experiences of fantasy and science fiction here in America from many white-owned publishers and their perspective of black people. And usually when we go out here and look at most black fantasy characters, they are created by white people, and usually we get to see the world from the white perspective and not really from our own perspective. And that whole perspective basically colors our perception of self and how we see ourselves as related to the genres of fantasy and science fiction. And with many black people, they basically see a character who is black in a fantasy or science fiction setting as only acceptable in the company of white people and not in the company of ourselves. And that really, again, colors our perception of self and how we see ourselves and the world that we imagine ourselves in fantasy and science fiction, and really colors things to the point where we only see things from that white perspective. Now, from my many years of reading many comics like Luke Cage, Black Panther, Static, and watching shows like Star Trek The Next Generation, I only saw black characters from the perspective of a world of white people, and that basically was the way I saw things because that's what the mainstream media presented to me. And I really didn't start thinking about seeing characters in the genre of fantasy and science fiction from a black perspective until I started really thinking about how I wanted to write my own fantasy and science fiction on the SJS Direct imprint. Because when I starting to put fingers to the keyboard for my fantasy and science fiction, I really wanted to come from a perspective that really showed most black children and most black adults that there could be a world where we could go out here and imagine ourselves in places where we can be the ones who can be a part of a world that's mainly focused on our perspective and our perception. Unfortunately, what I've found is that when it comes down to most black people, they still see fantasy and science fiction through a white lens. And because they see fantasy and science fiction through a white lens, their imaginations are extremely limited, and they can only see a world of black people in the context of being in a white world. And as they see themselves in the context of that white world, they really don't see how that black character that they're really looking at basically is one who's limited as related to their whole scope as related to perception. Now, when it comes down to these black characters who are a part of larger worlds created by white creators like Marvel Comics and DC Comics, these characters like the Falcon, Luke Cage, Cyborg, and many others, yes, they are very popular characters, but the whole thing is that black character, basically we only see them as related to a white person's perception of black people and never really get to see how they are from a perception or a perspective of black people. And that really, again, limits how far these characters can, grow as related to their development. As the way I see it, they really hampers their development because they really are not allowed to go out here and grow and show you a perception of a person who is really rich and multidimensional. No, when it comes down to many of these characters, they're only there to basically be there to fit into the white world, to make it get that semblance of diversity, but never really gives you that sense of inclusion where you really feel that this character is a part of a world where they have their own ability to have their own stories. No, usually in cases they're just in supporting roles in the background, but never really get to grow to the point where they can become lead characters. That's what I've seen with many of these black characters who are a part of white worlds, like the Marvel Universe or the DC Universe or the Star Trek Universe. They really don't grow past a certain point, and as a result, what happens is we really don't get to see that larger perspective as related to these characters growing to become, strong and actualizing their potential. Now, when it comes down to many black people, again, because they see these characters in a white lens, what happens is many black fans go out here and start thinking only about being a part of that white world, and they start thinking about creating covert contracts with their attachment to these characters to gain white validation and white acceptance. That's what I've been seeing as related to many of those black people who are a part of fandom. A lot of them basically are interested only in these black characters because they think they can create a covert contract where they can go out here and find acceptance with white fandom, but never really come to open up their imagination to see that larger world from that black lens or that black perspective. Now, when I go out here, I was a comic fan, again, for many years, and I love watching shows like Star Trek, The Next Generation, and I love seeing characters like Black Panther and Luke Cage, and characters like Black Lightning and Cyborg, and characters like Icon and Static. And the one thing that I always wanted to do when I started the SJS Direct imprint was I wanted to create a different perspective as related to the presentation of black characters. Now, when I go out here and create black characters, I don't really want to talk about how they're looking to fit into a white world and look for white validation and white acceptance, because to me, that's basically that character basically giving away their power. Yes, they have superpowers in some cases, but the whole thing is that we don't see them taking power for themselves. No, we basically see them looking to be accepted by other people, and that's not what I want to present in a story as related to black characters, because the problem with a lot of black people is that a lot of black people only see power as something that white people have and don't see it as something that they can have of their own. And that's one of the reasons why I go out here and try to show characters through a black lens, and try to show characters through that black lens so that you can see a world of black people who have power but don't give away their power seeking validation and approval from white people or seeking to be accepted by white people. No, when I go out here and do characters, I want people to see these characters from that, not only that black lens and that black perspective, but see that black person going out here and having the confidence to stand on their own. And as they have that confidence to stand on their own, they go out here and look to take their power by going out here and doing what they believe is best, not looking to go out here and covertly seek approval from white people. That's what I try to do whenever I do an ISIS, a John Haynes, an Esteem, or a Spinsterella story. I try to show black characters in a world of black people, and I try to show them in a world where we see the black people front and center. And as we see the black people front and center, they're not actively out here seeking the validation of white people or the approval of white people, and that's not seen as some sort of badge of honor or something that validates them as saying that this person, is acceptable and this as related to things. Because to me, that's when that character winds up losing their power overall as a character, because the only reason why people think this character is important is because the white characters have validated that character. And I don't really want to go out here and promote white validation and white approval, because if you promote white validation and approval, again, you may be creating powerful characters, but the irony is that you're giving away all their power. And as you give away all their power, what you're teaching kids who are black is that in order to be accepted in society, you need the approval and validation of white people. That's the message that basically a lot of kids get conditioned in as related to many black characters that they see in comics or TV or in the movies. Oh, this is an acceptable black character, and this character, because they are accepted by white people, this is a good person because they're accepted by white people. And that's what many black kids got conditioned to when I was growing up. And I don't want to go out and pass that on to the next generation of brothers and sisters. No, when it comes to the next generation of brothers and sisters, what I want to do is show them that we can go out here and have power to validate ourselves, and we have power to approve of ourselves, and we're not looking to go out here and look to be a part of a white world or looking for validation and approval from white people. Because I personally believe when you do that, you basically limit your imagination. And when you limit your imagination, you're basically sending a message to the world that you need to wait for a white person to give you permission in order to imagine yourself in a place. And that's really sad, because if you're waiting for the imaginary white person to give you that approval, you've basically taken away the power of your own imagination. And that's what happens that subconsciously to a lot of black people. They're still waiting for a white person to sign off on their ability to imagine themselves in different things and different worlds. And that's really, again, really sad, because that shows how deep the impact of white supremacy is on the black mind. It shows how deep the impact of white supremacy is, to the point where a black person is out here so afraid to basically imagine a world all their own. And instead, what they're doing is saying, hey, I can't have that power over my own imagination, and I can't have that power over myself. And that's really, again, sad to me, because God gave us power, and God gave us power over ourselves. And the sad part with a lot of black people is we give our power away every day, and we give it away in little ways that we don't even think about as related to everyday life. When it comes down to black people, a lot of us give away our power to white supremacy. And as we give away our power, what we do is limit ourselves. And as we limit ourselves, we put ourselves into these black boxes that are acceptable to white people. I go in depth on this in my novel, Spellbound. And the whole thing is that as we look to fit ourselves into a white world, we don't go out here and execute a vision for ourselves as related to how we want to be a part of the world. And that's something I don't want to do in my books. I don't want to go out here and, again, show you just a character like John Haynes going out here and has to wait for a white person to sign off on anything he needs to do. Nor do I want to show characters like Isis and Esteem only being in the context of, again, being gods in as related to a world full of white gods. No, I want to show you black gods in a context of them being under the authority of other black gods, and those black gods basically going out here and making decisions about the world around them. That's what I wanted to show with the ISIS and Esteem series, and with the John Haynes series, I wanted to show you a black man, again, in a position of power, but it's not because he's a CEO. That's not the reason why he has power. No, what he has is one, power from God that was given to him, and two, he has power because his perception of the world is not one where he's thinking about fitting himself into a white world, but going out here and doing the work of his Lord, because he knows that his Lord is the one who is the true creator of the universe, and he is not a man. So he doesn't have to go out here and only think about fitting himself into, again, being a part of a white world, or thinking about seeing only himself through a white lens. And that's the thing that I really want to hammer home as related to most of us black people. Again, we've got to get ourselves out of the mindset of thinking we only have to fit ourselves into, again, fantasy and science fiction through the white lens, because when we do that, again, we limit ourselves, we limit our imagination, we limit our vision of self, and instead of us looking to go out here and broaden our horizons and broaden our perspective of self the way many fantasy and science fiction writers do, what we do is limit ourselves to the confines of a black box. And as we limit ourselves to the confines of that black box, we only create stories where the black person is still looking for validation and approval from a white person, even though they're in a world that's basically, again, a world of science fiction, or a world of the supernatural, or a world of horror. You're basically putting your character in a box, and that makes it where that character can't reach their potential. It makes it where that character really can't really grow, because you've basically limited it due to your perception of self and the perspective you're coming from. And you don't want to do that if you're writing fantasy or science fiction. No, you don't want to fit yourself into a box and, again, limit your growth. And I've seen that with a lot of creators. Again, they limit themselves to just making another knockoff of Superman, or another knockoff of Batman, or they just look to make characters that, again, will fit in with the other white characters, but they won't go out here and say, hey, let's go out here and try to make a character who will be their own unique, distinct thing, and see the world, again, from that black perspective and that black lens, where we get to see a richer picture of black culture, a richer picture of black life, a richer picture of who we are as a people, and a richer picture of who we are and who we can be. That's what I want to go out here and present as related to fantasy and science fiction. I want to show you, again, black culture and black life, and show how it's a part of its own world. And as it's a part of its own world, basically it shows us, again, what we can contribute. I mean, that's one of the things that I liked about Netflix's Luke Cage. That was one of the programs that basically started to show me what I was looking to present as related to black fantasy from a black lens and a black perspective. I mean, Cheo Hodari Coker basically took the character of Luke Cage and showed us that this character from the issues of black life and a black perspective, and also went on to, as the story went on, basically showing us how he becomes the power man, basically taking power. And the one thing that I did not like about that whole direction, that I think came from white people, was they were trying to show this black man taking power as something bad. And again, this is something that black people have been conditioned to believe. A black person taking power is something that they should be uncomfortable about. That's where I ran into resistance on the John Haynes Godbreaker book. I mean, in the John Haynes Godbreaker book, the cover had John Haynes holding the hammer of Thor, and it made some of these black nerds and black fantasy types uncomfortable. But the whole point of fantasy and science fiction is to show our imagination and our power of imagination, and people get uncomfortable about black people, again, having that frame of mind where we look to take power, but we've got to start getting comfortable about taking power. And as we get comfortable about taking power, we can start to become more comfortable in a world where we are the ones who have power, we are the ones in control of our world, and we are the ones who are going to shape how we are going to be seen. That's what I try to do with books like the John Haynes Godbreaker book that some people had an issue with. I mean, the whole thing with that book was I was trying to show, again, John Haynes not being afraid of a god like Thor because he believed in the living God. And as he believed in the living God, he basically took power and showed the demon Delilah that he did not need the power of the Legion. But people, it went over their head because all they saw was a black man having power, not understanding you've been given power by God. And again, when it comes down to black people, we give away our power because a lot of us believe deeper in white supremacy, and that's not living at all. No, that's just existing. And the whole thing is that we have to start changing our perspective of self and perception of self, because living in a world through a white lens is a world where you basically are mentally enslaved, and as you are thinking you're seeing these fantastic characters, you're basically seeing yourself as a slave to the white system and the system and white supremacy. Now, if you want to check out some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series where we have gods who are black, the Esteem series about a former demon who is now looking for a relationship with Christ, and the John Haynes series, which shows you a black man taking power, you can go out here and find those books along with the Black Goth Spinsterella series on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And you can also find those books at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me go out here and be able to continue publishing positive black fantasy and black science fiction, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App so I can continue being able to pay artists to do the covers on SJS Direct Books and be able to help continue to stay on the air to continue talking about fantasy and science fiction from a black lens and a black perspective. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem, Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem, Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.